Hi, guys. Good evening. My name is Anthony Rivero, and welcome to tonight's main event. Breaking through the glass ceiling, in Power ng Pinoy, we have a saying that success never comes easily. Plan ahead, pray hard, and work even harder. And if you do well, give back and help others do well too. Yan ang power ng Pinoy. I'd like to acknowledge our guest speakers, but also sharing their valuable insight with us. Thank you so much. Now I'd like to introduce to everybody here, Miss Vivian Aralio, the Executive Director at the San Francisco nonprofit West Bay Filipino Multi-Service Center. Miss Vivian Aralio.
Kumusta po kayong lahat? Okay, great. Magtagalog tayo ng konti. We're here in a show for Power ng Pinoy. So, I'd like to introduce myself again. Yes, I'm the executive director at a nonprofit in San Francisco, and we serve youth and their families, Filipino immigrant youth and their families. It's a job that I'm very proud to do because I feel I'm doing my bit in helping my kababayan, our fellow Filipinos, adjust to life here in America. Of course, one might say that the glass ceiling is a concept that's just a little too far for them at this time, but not impossible. And that's what we're going to do today. We're going to visualize how it can be done, how to break that glass ceiling with people who I believe we can say have already broken that glass ceiling. So with that, we'll start our panel discussion. Joining us tonight is a distinguished panel of successful Filipinos in their respective fields. So we spoke before the show. We agreed that we'd tell the audience who we are, if we've broken the glass ceiling, indeed, if we've done that, and how we got there, all within the span of 3 minutes, okay? So, all right, let's start with Eric. Eric Refuerzo, he's the Senior Director of Finance at Cisco Systems. Tell us your story, Eric.
Well, first of all, Vivian, I just want to thank you very much, and I'm very humbled to be here amongst this very distinguished panel. It's quite an honor to be here amongst the presence of fellow Filipinos. I myself was born and raised here in California. My parents are from Ilocos Sur in the Philippines. They were both actually together in first grade. Wow. And I'm a product of a long-time love story, so.
That deserves applause, right?
Okay. So it is a pleasure, and really I think going back to my own heritage as well as where my parents came from was, I think, very, very important for me, because growing up here, it is quite easy, I think, to get accustomed to the American lifestyle and lose that sense of where you came from and who you are and how that affects the path that you're going to have in your life. And one of the things that I oftentimes echo to my teams as I've progressed in my career is do what you love. I think we've heard from Steve Jobs, be foolish. Go after your dreams. Have passion for what you do. Be the best person that you can possibly be. So those principles, are things that I realize that as I've moved along in my life and my career, I've taken that all the way back to my parents and learning from them in terms of them being very proud Filipinos, immigrating here 40 years ago, and creating a path for myself and my brother and my sister to really give us that opportunity to really do whatever it is that we wanted to do. And I think through that process and learning from, humble, hardworking people, and then realizing that it really was up to me, to find the things that I love. And what's interesting is I see out in the audience here one of a good friends of mine from the company I work for, and he's not Filipino. But the fact that you're here, I think, really speaks a lot as to what are some of the things that contribute to, I think, our path. And I think, when we speak a little bit about this concept of invisible minority,
right,
one of the things that's really powerful about being Filipino is that you feel this warmth and this connection that instantaneously allows for you to feel at home. And if there's anything that I've taken from my own path in my own family is being able to welcome that and embodying that along with my passions for technology, along with my passions for my family and my community. And, without a doubt, I mean, those are the things that have allowed for me to, I think, get to what I'm doing today. But, when we were speaking earlier, Vivian, we talked about, is there a glass ceiling? Have we broken that glass ceiling? And, oftentimes I believe that being invisible is part of breaking through that glass ceiling. And what I mean by that is it's not just simply acknowledging ourselves as a Filipino American, or acknowledging ourselves as a man or as a woman or as of a certain place, but it is really being your best and being authentic in how you bring yourself to the table, how you engage with people, how you really put everything you have into your profession. So it's been an honor and a privilege to be at this point, and I'm really looking forward to the future. I think that really this is an eye-opening experience for me to be able to see so many hungry, honest people here that want to achieve. And I thank Arnold for being one of those folks that really is passionate about raising awareness for our fellow Filipinos. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much. So it's Eric Refuerzo. Eric, by the way, is currently the Senior Director of Finance at Cisco Systems. As I had mentioned earlier, he leads financial planning and analysis for Cisco's $36 billion product development organization, and he has spent 20 years as a finance leader across several Fortune 500 technology companies and startups. That's a big deal. That's a lot, right? Now, our next panelist is Ms. Cora Tellez. She is the president and CEO of Sterling HSA. Cora serves as company president and CEO of Sterling HSA, which is a company that she herself founded in 2004. So that's another way to break the glass ceiling. Just create your own company. There's no ceiling to break, right? Cora has 25 years of management experience in healthcare finance and delivery. And prior to founding Sterling HSA, Cora was president of the Health Plans Division of HealthNet Incorporated, a giant insurance provider that operates in 7 states with revenue of $8 billion from health plans. Welcome, Cora. So tonight, you're going to tell us where you came from, your journey, and maybe a little bit about the glass ceiling that you broke.
Great, thank you. And thank you. I loved your story, and I'm very humbled and very grateful to be here, and thank you very much for inviting me. So I was born in the Philippines. I came in 1961. If you're doing the math, I'm 65 years old. Came in 61. English wasn't terrific for me. And so I had to learn English, of all things, by watching I Love Lucy. You can just imagine what my vocabulary was like coming here. But there were several things, even as a young girl, that I figured out that has actually helped me a lot. My mother was always very strong in her community. And when we first came to this country, she was asked to volunteer and march for the March of Dimes. That meant you had to knock on the door and ask for money, right? Mm-hmm. And because she didn't feel confident about her English skills, she sent me. So that year, I marched for the March of Dimes, the Easter Seal, the American Lung, the American Cancer Society, Muscular Dystrophy, blah, 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 blah. And that year, Mom won the Volunteer of the Year award. I tell you this for a couple of things. One is communication skills are really, really critical. And I don't mean having an accent, because that's not the point. It's the ability to communicate clearly and directly what you want. That's one. The second thing is understanding, when I was in high school, that Americans valued certain things that weren't always compatible with Filipino culture. And I had to figure that out. And there were some Filipino values that work really well here, and that if I ignored it, I would not be as successful. So among American values that are really critical are what? They value assertiveness, right? So being humble has its place, but not always, certainly not in corporate America. Being able to be assertive, I'm not aggressive, but assertive about your point of view is very critical. It's tough if you're Filipina, a woman, and 5 feet tall.
Me too.
So one of the things that you learn to do is to project a presence that says, I am really powerful. I have something to say. It would be great if you could listen to me because I have a compelling story to tell. So that's sort of been my story. It's also appreciating that there are certain values that really worked for me. Filipinas are really great at networking. We understand pakikisama, di ba? We know what it's like to get along and to work well with people. And that has stood me in great stead as I moved up corporate America. From Kaiser, so I was I ended 16 years of working at Kaiser as the president of their Hawaii plan. Somebody had to do it, it was me. So Hawaii was really great, and then moved to Blue Shield, and then president of Prudential, the West Coast operations, finally HealthNet. And when I left in corporate America in '02, there was one glass ceiling. I'm not sure it was a glass ceiling. It's always been a dream of mine, which is, what would it take for me to start my own company? And what are the traits, Filipino traits, that would stand me in good stead? And so all the values that mom and dad taught me actually served me pretty well. You work hard, pakikisama, you are good with your communication, and you're honest and have all of that. So that's worked very well for me. I'm really pleased about it. The company now is 10 years old. Got 84 employees now, still a small company, but I took all of them to Hawaii last week to celebrate our 10th anniversary. Isn't that great? They loved it. All right, so I'm being asked to tone down because I'm almost done. So I'm, again, very happy to be here. I'm especially encouraged to see young people. So all of us here have moved at this level. We have high expectations for you. So we expect the millennials to keep going. You're not fighting the barriers that we fought. You will have other barriers. But our hope is that our stories will inspire you and will enable you to conquer and break through even more glass ceilings. Thank you.
Thanks, Cora. Great story. Wonderful. I'm very inspired being 5 feet tall and a woman, okay? So now our next speaker, of course, you already met him earlier. His name is, of course, Major General Antonio Taguba, retired from the U.S. Army and currently ambassador for AARP. Major General Tony Taguba retired in January 2007, having served 34 years on active duty. Amazing. And he's managed, of course, to reinvent himself. Sir.
Thank you, Vivian. First of all, Cora, can I work for you? So
I know, me
you
too.
Hawaii? Come on.
I can't afford you.
I'm still up. I'll work for free. Just take me to Hawaii. Okay. Thanks. Anyway, I was born in Manila on Halloween. I'll tell you when. I won't tell you the date. I always told my parents that I was a treat more than a trick. But the same year with Cora, my family and I immigrated to Hawaii in 1961. And you all know Hawaii is a hodgepodge of different nationalities, multi-generational, multicultural, and the like. But that doesn't mean that just arriving from a foreign country, you get easily accepted. People recognize who are immigrants because of our inability to speak the King's English. So we had to learn how to speak Pidgin English, which is we call missionary English. So that's fine. Working through all those details with my siblings and the like. And my father, of course, my parents originated from Cagayan, Tuguegarao, Apari, Ilocos, that part of the world. But I got my values from my parents. My mom was a nurse's aide at the prisoner of war camp when she was 16 in Santo Tomas. And my dad was captured at Bataan with many thousands, or 250,000 of them, but escaped on the third day and became a guerrilla, which we didn't know until 4 months before he died. He died last year or the year before. So in any case, so I decided that, not being in Hawaii is just not enough for me. I'm one of 7, first son, and typically first son is supposed to take care of the family, right? Well, my plans were different. I wanted to do something a little different, of course, thinking that I was going to take care of the family as well. So I left after my high school years and my college years in Hawaii. I went to an obscure Catholic college called Chaminade, I decided that I was going to earn a lot of money and transfer to another obscure college called Idaho State University, where there's three things you don't talk about: sex, religion, and politics. And if you know where Idaho is, it's not Iowa, it's Idaho. In a little community town of 7,000, there were only 2 Filipinos in that whole campus of 7,000. Me and a gay guy from Colorado, okay? But then, being that, you have a different orientation, we were friends. So, we had to deal with that since there were only 2 of us. And then I chose the career path of being in the military. I was in junior ROTC in high school. I was in Army ROTC in college. I just like that type of discipline, that type of regimentation. But little did I know that I was entering into what I would call the unintended consequence of being a minority, of someone that sort of like you're lost in the mix, you might say. In my first unit, there were only 2 of us Filipinos. One is a sergeant, and then there was me. And that was at the tail end of the Vietnam War, where I was associated with being Vietnamese, Viet Cong, you name it, because I heard those names behind me: Slope, Slant Eye, Gook, and the like. And we can tell all about that. But in any case, so this proverbial thing called the glass ceiling is an attitude as far as I was concerned. I thought for the very first part that the only rank I was ever going to reach was as a captain. Well, I'll tell you that story more later during the questions and answers, but little did I know that I was going to get promoted to Major General, second only to Lieutenant General Ed Soriano, who's from San Jose. So we had to deal with that. There were just 2 of us. So we dispelled this notion that there's a glass ceiling everywhere. There might be, but for Ed and I, we broke it. And after 3 to 4 generations, other people starts coming over. So how did we do that? We wanted to be sure that we just didn't break the gas ceiling, but we want to ensure that it remained broken for others to follow on. And there's more stories to that because we have other Filipino generals serving today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, General Taguba. It's okay. They got it. So anyway, our next speaker is someone who's broken not just the glass ceiling, but the age barrier. Okay. Emmanuel Masinsin is Vice President of Enterprise Social Media in Wells Fargo. Ladies and gentlemen, a Vice President. How old are you again?
29.
Yes. All right. You tell me he didn't break some barrier right there. Okay, so Emmanuel is a Wells Fargo's technology leader of social media. He's the technology leader to Wells Fargo's enterprise social media department, impacting the company's 80-plus businesses. He guides the company's social media technology relations and enterprise initiatives in the digital space. So, Emmanuel, tell us about your amazing journey being part of the millennial generation.
Salamat, Vivian. I think it's still getting there. So I want to tell, I guess, the background story of where I initially came from, just like all the panelists who've gone before me. And definitely am kind of a bit out of the mold because I was actually born in Puerto Rico. Coming from Puerto Rico, I was actually situated in Florida for essentially ever since 2 years ago, since I took this role in Wells Fargo. Story behind that is that my dad was actually also in service, was serving the U.S. Navy, probably during the same time as General here. And he was actually part of the first, probably first or second bracket of Navy recruits that came from the Philippines during, right during the Marcos era. So he was able to come to, or join the U.S. Navy, and brought my mom along, and they decided, of course, to situate their life abroad in Puerto Rico, and eventually led them all across the U.S. and to Florida. One thing that the story behind, I think, me being my journey, at least going into where I'm at right now, I think it started first and foremost when I was, I recall. Being, of course, raised as a Filipino, despite being born within the U.S. territory, and of course, my first language was Filipino. So I recall it was either kindergarten. This is actually my first recollection ever in my life. It was either kindergarten or around that time, and of course, we were we were in a playground. It was break time, and it was funny because like I don't know how I got by going to school without saying one English word because I didn't know how to speak it. I know how to understand it, but when I would listen, I'd speak in Filipino. So I remember we were in the playground, and somehow one of the teachers or teacher's assistants tells me, push, just say push, and I'll push you. And in my head, I was trying to process that. So I was saying, tulak, tulak. So she looked at me. It's like they looked at me in a very unique way where he's not saying push. So that journey led me to it was really funny because like it really broke me from my group where I essentially was put into a separate class, and they call it ESL or ESOL, depends where you're at, and literally just trying to teach you English as your second language. So it was just really interesting how that came about, and that's kind of been my impression of essentially growing up and knowing that I was different from everyone. Fortunately enough, even though if I was raised in Florida, I didn't really feel segregation amongst my peers. Not once, but of course, it's funny because like I was probably the only minority out of a class of hundreds, and so we were probably only 3 or 4 of us that were minorities, and I was probably 1 or 2 Filipinos. So despite that, I still saw myself as one of the class. But when I would look myself in the mirror, it's different. It's like you see yourself in the yearbook. You see everyone either Caucasian or black, because in North Florida, in the South, it's either white or black. So anyways, going to that, that was my only how I was able to distinguish myself. I was very different. So despite my skin color, who am I as I guess as a Filipino? So I think since that realization, and I've always had an inkling to understand who I was as a Filipino. Of course, very much proud as an American, but how I was as a Filipino. So from that journey along, I've always, my hobby was actually studying the Filipino culture, whatever part in the Philippines. So that's kind of led through my journey of just knowing who I am. And surprisingly enough, I think that's what led me to where I am, what I'm doing right now with Wells Fargo. Just to fast forward to where I'm at right now, so I do lead the social media technology all across Wells Fargo. And while like Vivian was able to mention, I feel I did break the glass ceiling, but there's a lot more. I'm not going to stop at vice president. There's a lot more things that I could break. I'm seeing executives out there, executive vice presidents, even the CEOs and executives where there's really no representation of Filipinos. There's probably a handful of them that are of minority descent, but it would be great if we have that representation amongst us Filipino. And with that said, I not only do I feel like I want to do it for myself, I want to do it as a Filipino. And one last thing is like when I speak as with my successes, I always highlight that I'm Filipino, and it's nothing that I try to shy away from. Everyone knows that I'm Filipino. So that's my story there, and hopefully, as I climb this glass ceiling, we bring each other along, and so that's what I hope to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Emmanuel. It's a great story, and very distinct, mainly because of your age bracket, perhaps. I find it amazing that you didn't feel a tinge of discrimination being only one of 3 Filipinos in the whole school. That's amazing. That's, I think, that shows that we are progressing as a society somehow. And our next speaker, of course, is Mayor Jose Esteves, Mayor of Milpitas, California. He was elected Milpitas mayor only 4 times, okay? Just 4 times, that's all. Wait a minute. Let's get technical. You get 3 terms, right? Then you hit your term limit. Then Mayor Esteves decided to step back and then run again and again and one more time this coming November, right? And he was also, of course, a city councilman from 1998 to 2002 and was voted Milpitas' best elected official from 2003 to 2008. So many years here. Became Milpitas Citizen of the Year. And of course, Milpitas is one of the top 50 cities in America today. Mayor Joe Esteves.
Thank you. Thank you. First, I want to recognize my fellow panelists here. I really salute you for where you are right now. I also want to commend the audience because just your presence tonight means that you agree that each one of us should aim higher than we are today. I'm Jose Esteves, current mayor serving my fifth term as mayor of Milpitas. I was born in Dagupan City, Philippines. And as a young person, I was very adventurous. In fact, I speak, of course, our language, Tagalog. Marunong po ako mag-Tagalog. Hindi ko po nakakalimutan yon. Magaling din po ako ng Pangasinan. Marunong nga man salita ay Pangasinan. Ilocano is also my forte. Nalaingak sa Ilocano. And I'm very proud because as Filipino, we should be very well into our culture. And I always carry that with me. I grew up half of my life in the Philippines, up to around 35 when I came here. So I graduated from the University of the Philippines with a double degree in engineering and MBA. I went up my career ladder and ending up as a vice president of a big corporation in the Philippines before coming here to America. Of course, why did I ever come here? Well, a big and short story. Well, during that time, Philippines was really not in the best of shape, especially in personal security and family security. So I had to think long term. For me, I would say I could survive in the Philippines. I have my job, I have my career. But I've thought of my family and my children's future. So I said maybe it's an opportunity to come to the States and maybe, start a future for my family and children. Anyway, they will always have the option to go back to the Philippines if they need to. But on the other hand, it was a painful decision for me because, as always, my heart is already close to the Philippines in terms of career, in terms of friendship, in terms of community services. But you have to make hard decisions. So I did decide to come here. And so, again, as always, like many one of us, I agreed to start all over again, from the bottom up. Okay, as an engineer, as a programmer analyst, and worked 26 years as a systems manager. In Silicon Valley, you have to have a career. Of course, why did I become a mayor? As always, part of me is helping and joining the community. Part of my many years in my daily life is joining and helping volunteering. I'm very active in our church, in many charitable organizations, in civic and community organizations, including that of the city of Milpitas as a government entity. So I started as a planning commissioner, but as always, I've always thought that, when you serve in public service, that I know running for a mayor, for example, will not enrich me. That was not my goal, and I knew that. It's more of really giving services. So when I joined and ran and won, I said, nothing for me. So maybe I'm the only one, or very few ones, who really waive all the big pension and medical benefits for a government employee. But I committed to my service. So maybe from 1998 to the present, I'm one of the very few who has not missed a single council meeting. That's how committed I am. And when you want to break the glass ceiling, it means to say you have to do more than the others. You have to break the record. You cannot afford to be ordinary. And that's when people will respect you. When you said you can do what you said you can do, and at the same time excel when you said you can excel. So with that, I'm very happy to serve as Mayor of Milpitas. Yes, we are one of the best cities in the whole of the United States, and many more. But it's just a great award for me and for the people of the city of Milpitas. So all of you, I urge you to look into where you are. Excel, do the best you can with the best of character. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Do you even wonder why he got reelected 6 times? So our next speaker, of course, is Well, another one from the millennial generation. Earl Martin Valencia, founder and president of Idea Space Incorporated. Staggering. First, let's start. How old is Earl? Earl is 24. Okay.
32.
It says 24 right here.
It's different. When I won an award, it's 24.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. All right. My bad. All right. 32, still great. Really great. But Earl is a president and co-founder of the Idea Space Foundation, a nonprofit incubator and accelerator based in Manila. You're going to tell us what a nonprofit incubator means, okay?
Yes, of course.
With $12 million in funding. Idea Space is funded by First Pacific, one of the largest business groups in Southeast Asia focused on telecom, energy, infrastructure, and agriculture. He's currently Vice President of Corporate Development and Innovation at Smart Communications. Now, let me backtrack. When he was 24, he is not 24 currently, he is 32, but when he was 24, he was one of the new faces of engineering published in USA Today. And he was one of 15 engineers with the highest potential for impact under 30 years old in the USA. And in the past years, he was named one of Manila's 40 under 40 by DevEx and honored as a young global leader by the World Economic Forum. Wow, Earl. Tell us how that happened.
Whew, I don't know,
I
actually.
know, wow.
You know, but I guess, you know, I'm also honored. I told actually Arnold, like, I don't know if I actually broke the bamboo or glass ceiling, but then what I can only tell you about is kind of, you know, the journey about what I've done, and then really the mindset of actually saying that there's no such thing,
Huh?
right? So in the end of the day, so I was actually born in LA, and during a time actually, because my parents had to leave because there was a lot of just turmoil in the Philippines. My family had kidnapping threats, etc. So my mom went to the U.S. for a couple of years, and then I was born here. But then my dad couldn't leave the family business, so after I think a year or two, my mom moved back with me, you know, to grow up in Manila. And then after a few years, actually when I was 17 or 18, I decided to move back here in the U.S. for college. So I went to 2 years in UP, and then I went to the East Coast to BU for undergrad, and then to Cornell for grad school. And actually, for people who also moved here relatively late, especially the academic sense, one thing that I realized in the US is that everything is based on a curve, right? I don't know if you guys noticed that, but that everything will get measured relative to everybody else. And for me, coming from the Philippines at 18, that wasn't my mindset. I thought, you're going to get 95 and you're going to do well. Well, everybody got 98, you're not going to do well, right? So that particular thing made me realize that I'm in a different league. So I made a decision that I will compete, and that I will compete at the highest level. And for me, there's just two things, right? It's about the power of education. So I had to just get the best education I can that Americans respected. So I went to an Ivy League school and I went to Stanford for business school, right? So I said, hey, at the end of the day, I have to benchmark myself as to who I wanted to be, which is maybe a CEO of a Fortune 500 company someday, right? And then I said, how do I also do this? So after actually undergrad, I went to a company called the Raytheon Company, which is a big aerospace conglomerate. And it's kind of strange, you know, coming from the Philippines, I wanted to be an astronaut. And he said, how close can I get to building satellites and to doing stuff with satellites? I worked for an aerospace company. It's very unheard of, right? I mean, there is a few Filipinos, but very few that's actually designing the things. So a lot of times, one thing I also realized from the glass ceiling perspective, sometimes we limit ourselves. We say, you know what, I could not design these things. I could not become in this group just because I'm in this position. But I said, you know, no. You know, if I had to compete in college to be the best and get A's and graduate top of my class, I can compete anywhere, right? Even that mindset itself kind of just propelled, I think, a lot of things. So I was lucky I got into a leadership program. Raytheon moved me all around the U.S., you know, started in Boston and then Florida and then Texas. So that's another thing. A lot of times people want stability, but then another value that American corporations really respect is risk-taking and moving. So I had to move. It was really strange and difficult. And my mom said, you know, why can't you just be stable and be in one place, right? But I said, no, 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 I have to do this, right? And then even when I was, I got that award, so it was pretty cool. Like I was in, big in the front of the website of Raytheon, a Fortune 100 company, and then I got my admission to Stanford Business School. I only applied to one school, and my mom said, "You're already on top. Why are you even leaving?" Right? So that's another thing. A lot of times, the stable part
Right.
is something that might be good, but then you really have to assess: is this stable, good, long term for my ambition? Right? And then I did another crazy, risky thing. About 3 years ago, less than 3 years ago, I decided to move back to the Philippines.
Yeah.
Right. So
that's-
I was in Cisco, right, in the headquarters in a group called Emerging Technologies. I was the only one who didn't grow up in the U.S. I was the only one from East Asia. Only one, obviously, that's from the Philippines, right? So I covered the emerging market just because they thought I knew the emerging markets, right? But so again, when I got an offer to lead corporate development in a major company in the Philippines, Smart PLDT. Again, everybody said, "Man, this is really crazy," right? But then because of that, it's just about risk taking. I told my boss, his name is Manny Pangilinan, if I go home, I have to create this venture fund, right? Because I need to give us a fighting chance to Filipino innovators who might not have access to seed capital. So before I actually went back to the Philippines, seed capital was non-existent in the country, right? People who just have ideas, sorry, right? Take a bank loan, collateral, right? That's reality. But so in the end of the day, so I opened up now my US office in San Francisco. So now I'm doing the reverse, right? It doesn't mean when you do risky stuff, you cannot control your destiny. You just say, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to now conquer the US, coming from the Philippines, and I don't know what's going to happen after. But let's try it out, right? And maybe that's the mindset that I think hopefully you guys will have in the future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Earl. Amazing. Amazing story. Amazing. Now, okay, the reason why we're all here, we're discussing breaking a glass ceiling, right? So let's face it. People look up to you guys as people who've broken the glass ceiling because they aspire to do that, right? You are their role models. Now, tell us, in one sentence, what's holding us back? Maybe as Filipinos, as immigrants, as Filipino Americans, what's holding us back? As Major General Taguba told us, there's a lot of reasons why our community hasn't seemed to produce as much leaders in Fortune 500 companies, in government, as it should, us being the second biggest immigrant community in the United States. One sentence, Eric. What's holding the Filipino community back? You're right beside me.
Earl, I'm really inspired by what you said, but I think you hit it really on the nail when you said that it all starts with your mentality. I think that oftentimes, and it's not just a Filipino thing, but I do think that people limit themselves. They limit themselves in terms of what they can do. They also limit themselves in terms of the possibilities, and they don't benchmark themselves against really what is great, what is the best, and that's something that I think we all can easily, really simply do. It's not that hard to say, well, what do I love? What am I doing? What is the best in the world in terms of that particular area, and go after it, with really no mentality breakage or anything like that. It's really up to you, and sacrifices are part of it, and I think that's where everyone has their choices as to what they're willing to sacrifice and what they're willing to overcome. So it is important to understand really what is the standard before you can set a new standard, and that's really ultimately what the best in the world do. Is they are constantly, every day, not resting, and they're looking at does it take to be the best, not just for a year, for like the next 10 years, for the next 20 years. So just changing your mindset, I think, is clearly really the critical element of breaking through.
So did you say, Eric, that what's holding us back is some kind of mindset?
Absolutely.
All right.
I find that just to be a very common perspective, as I spend time with generations of my peer groups. And I think that it's just something that, I'm not sure where it comes from, but
That was my next question. Maybe Cora can tell us. Where do you think that mindset that Eric is, first of all, do you agree that mindset matters? And where do you think it comes from?
Oh yeah, I really appreciate the comments here. I think sometimes we don't dream big enough. Our dreams aren't big enough, and we don't have the courage to execute. Part of it comes, I think, from a culture that's very deferential to authority. You're told no, and boy, you accept it. And Americans don't understand no. They don't understand limits particularly well. And so that is a mental barrier that we just have to cross. I just find the older I get, the harder it is for me to accept authority, period, from anybody. No one's going to tell me what to do. If I want to do something, get out of my way, because I'm going to do it. And that's got to be the mindset that we all have. That it takes real guts to do that. Because our culture, particularly if you're a Filipina, is you don't do that. You step aside, you get smaller, you apologize all over the place. I am so bloody sick of that, but that's what we do. So we've got to change that. Thank you.
All right, a little bit more, not just a lot more assertive, right? Is that right? Now, I'm going to go back to you, Cora, actually. So, as a woman, all right, let's face reality. You're a Filipino immigrant. You're a woman, all right? That's already two, kind of like two strikes, sort of, in a way. Like it sets you back a little bit. At least that's a common perception. How about the part of you being a woman?
I love being a woman. I am absolutely convinced that being a woman, being an immigrant, being a Filipina plays to my strengths. It's very possible to use those attributes in a positive way.
For example, please.
Well, they don't expect a lot from us. I mean, come on. They don't expect a lot.
Really?
And it's so fabulous to be able to just smash
That's
those
true, though.
stereotypes. One, to be able to be articulate. They don't expect Filipino women to be articulate, to stand up tall, to be able to do the things that we've been able to do. You don't know, and one of the things that I've served, I'm on my 8th publicly traded board of directors. I chair one of them. I'm also on a venture-backed board, which is Practice Fusion, which for the millennials, is a big woo-woo of a thing. But one of the interesting parts that I've noticed is that being a Filipina, being a woman, and usually and always being the only one, actually just sets me up to succeed in a very big way.
Amazing, thank you.
Not actually the other way around, but it sets me up to succeed.
Sort of like being underestimated and exceeding.
You bet.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Cora. Wonderful, very inspiring, right? Now, Major General Taguba, I am going to ask you the inverse of that question. There's a perception that Asian men kind of like are weaker and soft. I'm sorry, but you know this to be a common perception, right? So, you don't? Well, I'm telling you, I just read it in the newspaper the other day. So, there is that Asian men, perhaps because of our build and all of that, are perceived to be weaker and softer and therefore easier to dominate and perhaps makes it harder for them to break that glass ceiling. Tell us some thoughts about that, being an Filipino-American male in America. How has that played a part somehow?
Well, first of all, I resemble that comment. Growing up in the military. That's way back when. That was in the 70s. But if you take a look, I grew up in a profession of about 2 million people. So, and 4% of that are Asian Americans. So you do the math. 1/2 of 1% are Filipinos. So you do the further math. So when you look at my stature, right? 5'6", when I was then, I weigh 150 pounds now, but back then I was 125. So people would pretty much do the domination thing, the intimidation and the whole thing, because it was predominantly white, 78%. And not that many of us Filipino officers to begin with. And so, one of my success stories is that my career was going to end if I didn't do anything as a captain with a wife and a child. So I had to seek a mentor. I had to ask somebody as my go-to person, what am I doing wrong and what am I doing right? And kind of point me, kick me on my butt in whatever. And this guy is puti, white. So given that, and the message he gave me was that winning is an attitude, if you think about it. Winning is an attitude. If you think you're not winning, then you're having an attitude. Okay? So maybe you ought to take up another profession because this is a highly competitive, hierarchical, institutionally biased, and the like. We still have it today. People would just want to admit that. And my job as a commander, all the way up to the major general, was to train and educate my men and my women, soldiers, to be successful. That was my one job, to be ready for combat, to be deployed and whatever have you. I do not have the luxury to train them and educate them to fail. That is not what we're all about. We have to look behind us and say, come on up here. What's the problem? Did you go to school? Blah, blah, blah. That's our core competency, making people successful. So, if you're not going to help them win with an attitude of losing, then you're just losing yourself. So the mindset is, if you tell them that you got to be this high in order to get promoted, then just don't tell them that, because they already know that. Show them how to get there. That's our job. I mentioned mentoring and succession planning. That's what we do. And that's what we ought to do. It's not just the military or civilian world or whatever have you. If I ask my fellow panelists there, if you've been successful like me, have you looked behind you and see who else is coming behind you? We got to do that. We don't do that very well in our community, by the way. We've been successful, make a lot of money, we're satisfied, we go home, just an observation. And then when we look behind you, we said, man, it's going to take another generation to grow another general. It's not that we're trying to grow generals, by the way. And so friends of mine, when we all retired and we say, gosh, Asian Americans are being discounted here. Asian Americans, not just Filipinos. This is in 2007. So we decided we're going to stand up a group called the Pan-Pacific American Leaders and Mentors. So what we do today is diverse, white, black, Hispanic, you name it, military and civilians, and whatever aspirations they have, we match them with a mentor who has been in our shoes before. No cost to them, help this person succeed. That's all you have to do.
Correct.
Mentoring is the best investment, I think, we can for human development. Because you don't want to disappear, right? You don't want to be extinct. And we ought not to be extinct. My other mentor says, hey, if you want to be a leader in the military or the civilian world, be visible. But have somebody else bid you to bring up so they can be visible. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Major General Taguba. Amazing.